there is a three-piece puzzle: a head, a torso, and a base. You snap them together. A toddler could do it. And yet, for 3 straight years on national television, child after child after child stood in front of this puzzle, completely fell apart, and lost everything. If you grew up in the 90s, you just felt something in your chest, because you know exactly what I am talking about. You have screamed at your television over this. You have questioned the intelligence of children you have never met, and you have never ever forgotten the shrine of the silver monkey. But here is what you did not know. The show that monkey belonged to? It was built on a shoestring budget, held together with foam rubber and RadioShack parts. It was hosted by a man who was picked out of a headshot catalog at random. It traumatized so many children that former contestants are still talking about it in therapy decades later, and the entire final round? It was literally designed so that almost nobody could win? This is the untold story of Legends of the Hidden Temple, the most beloved, most unhinged, and most secretly broken game show Nickelodeon ever made. And by the end of this video, you will never look at Olmec the same way again. Before Legends of the Hidden Temple existed, its creators pitched Nickelodeon a completely different show. It was called Monster Island. The concept was simple. Kids would race through a haunted house guarded by classic Universal Studios monsters: Dracula, Frankenstein, the Mummy, and at the end, they would rescue a princess. Nickelodeon's president at the time, Herb Scannell, looked at the pitch and said something along the lines of, "This is really interesting, but you have to get rid of the monsters. How about if we put it in a jungle?" And just like that, Monster Island became Legends of the Hidden Temple. The monsters became temple guards, the haunted house became a Mayan labyrinth, and the princess at the end became a historical artifact that somehow ended up inside a giant stone temple in Orlando, Florida. Now, the creators, Scott Stone and David Stanley, had a vision. They wanted kids to feel like they were living inside an Indiana Jones movie. The problem was, they had roughly the budget of a lemonade stand. And nowhere is that more obvious than in how they built the single most iconic prop in Nickelodeon history: Olmec, the giant talking stone head, the deep voice, the glowing red eyes, the all-knowing narrator who guided every episode. As a kid, Olmec felt ancient and powerful, like something pulled from a real archaeological dig. In reality, Olmec was a chunk of foam rubber with a 2x4 nailed to the back of his lower lip. That is not a joke. The creators originally wanted a Disney-level animatronic head. They reached out to the Jim Henson puppet shop, the people behind the Muppets, and got a quote that was, in their words, insanely out of their budget. So the production designers carved a face out of foam, mounted it on the set, and rigged a literal piece of lumber behind it so someone could move the jaw up and down manually. But there was a problem. Olmec looked dead. He was just a big, lifeless foam head sitting there. So they thought, what if we put lights in the eyes? That would at least make him feel alive. But the lights needed to flicker when Olmec talked, not just glow constantly. And nobody knew how to build that. There was no money. So David Stanley drove to a RadioShack and bought a voice-activated disco ball. You know the kind. The little novelty lights that flash in time with music at a house party. He wired the disco ball's sound-activated sensor to Olmec's eye sockets and connected it to a microphone. Every time the voice actor spoke, the eyes flickered. And that was it. That was the magic. A foam face, a 2x4, and a $9 disco ball from RadioShack created one of the most memorable characters in children's television history. But the man inside that head? He turned out to be even more legendary than Olmec himself. And the way the host got his job is almost as ridiculous as the disco ball. The voice of Olmec was D. Bradley Baker. During filming, Baker would physically stand behind the 6-foot-tall foam head, holding a script in one hand and pulling the 2x4 jaw lever with the other. When Olmec was not speaking, Baker would either sit inside the head and read a book or climb out and watch the stunts from behind the set. What nobody watching at home could have predicted is that D. Bradley Baker would go on to become arguably the most prolific voice actor who has ever lived. As of today, he has over 1,700 credited characters: SpongeBob, Phineas and Ferb, American Dad, Avatar: The Last Airbender, Star Wars: The Clone Wars, He even voices a parrot on the Pirates of the Caribbean ride at Disneyland. And it all started with a guy standing behind a foam head pulling a stick. Now, the host of the show, Kirk Fogg, his hiring was equally absurd. Fogg was plucked out of a headshot catalog. Producers were flipping through photos, saw his face, and called him in to read from a teleprompter. It was his first hosting gig ever. Before Legends, Fogg had been bartending at a TGI Fridays in Orange County, then somehow ended up bartending in Paris, then moved to New York to do theater, where he was literally hit by a bus crossing 57th Street and broke his arm. Then he worked on a fellowship with Steven Spielberg's Amblin Entertainment. And then, randomly, a game show about a Mayan temple. Kirk Fogg once told an interviewer, quote, "When I die, the first line that will come out will be, 'The former host of Legends of the Hidden Temple has died tragically, but you know what? I am sure glad to be remembered by something like this.'" But Kirk Fogg did something most people do not know about. Before every single season, he would personally set the clock to 3 minutes and run through the entire temple himself to prove it was beatable. He said it left him feeling like he might be having a heart attack. Which raises a very uncomfortable question. If a grown man nearly collapsed running the temple, what was it like for the 12-year-olds? And why did almost none of them ever win? This is where the story gets darker. And I need to explain something about how this show was actually filmed, because it changes everything. Here's what viewers at home never saw. Legends of the Hidden Temple did not film one episode at a time. They filmed in bulk, all the moat crossings for multiple episodes in a row. Then all the Steps of Knowledge rounds, then all the temple games, and then at the very end, after the kids had been on set for hours and hours, they filmed the temple runs. Kirk Fogg admitted this openly. He said, quote, "We would shoot all the moat, all the steps, all the temple games, and then finally at the end of the night, when they were properly delirious, then we would send them through the temple." By the time the temple run filmed, the studio audience had usually gone home for the night. So, picture this. You are 12 years old. You have been on set since morning. You are exhausted, overstimulated, and running on sugar and adrenaline. And now, in a mostly empty studio, late at night, you are sent alone into a dark 2.5-story vertical maze filled with locked doors, confusing puzzles, and grown adults hiding in the walls waiting to jump out and grab you. And here is the thing the show never told you. Out of 120 episodes, only about 32 teams ever won the temple run. That is roughly a 25% win rate. And according to Kirk Fogg, that was by design. He told Great Big Story that the producers simply did not have the budget to award a grand prize to too many kids.
The producers were only allowed to give out 8 championships a year, so there was a budget, and that's the truth of that.
The show was built so you would lose. Now, about those temple guards, because this is the part that broke people. Remember, the original concept for this show involved monsters chasing children through a haunted house. When Nickelodeon said no monsters, the creators replaced them with temple guards. Men in Mayan costumes with feathered headdresses and expressionless masks, hiding inside fake trees, inside suits of armor, behind walls, and inside furniture. They were supposed to be the toned-down version. They were not toned down. Creator Scott Stone has admitted that there was, quote, "a crier in pretty much every episode, but the show carefully edited out every single tear." He said, quote, "We shot a lot of crying. We did not use any crying. We protected them." But the damage was already done. The guards were instructed to gently take the kids when they caught them. Stone said, quote, "We told them not to scare the kids. We told them to gently take them, but it scared the crap out of the kids no matter what." A former contestant named Keeley was interviewed as an adult at age 31 and said, quote, "I am 31 and I cannot go to haunted houses. I am deathly afraid of things popping out of closets and doors." She traced that fear directly back to her temple run. Another former contestant wrote a high school paper years later about the single scariest experience of her life. It was the temple guards. One kid got so terrified during a temple run that he ran completely out of the temple set, past the cameras, and off the stage. He was disqualified. Another girl threw up in the pit of despair from the sheer combination of stress and physical exhaustion. Kirk Fogg later said, quote, "Give her credit though, she composed herself while the crew cleaned the pit." And then there were the kids who fought back. Multiple children, when grabbed by a temple guard, instinctively elbowed the grown men in the crotch. Which, honestly, fair. But here is the part that might actually be the most absurd detail in this entire story. The temple guards were played by crew members, writers, stagehands, whoever was available. Scott Stone's own cousin, Jed, was a writer on the show who also served as a temple guard and appeared in costume during the animated Legends segments. Everyone wore multiple hats because there was no money to hire dedicated performers. And the guy whose job it was to hide inside the dark forest room and wait for kids? Temple Guard stunt supervisor Michael Lupia later said it was his least favorite assignment because the fake tree limbs cut into his arms and the entire room smelled like, quote, 3 years worth of BO foam rubber, it turns out, is not friendly to human sweat. So, there is one more mystery we need to solve before we leave this temple. The Shrine of the Silver Monkey. 3 pieces. Head, torso, base. You put them together, you move on. Every single person who has ever watched this show has lost their mind watching kids fail at this puzzle. It is 3 pieces, it looks like the easiest thing in the world, and kid after kid after kid put the head on upside down, jammed the torso on backwards, and ran out of time while an entire nation screamed at their televisions. Kirk Fogg has defended those kids until the day he dies. He explained that by the time contestants reached the shrine, they had already run through multiple rooms, been scared half to death by guards, solved other puzzles, climbed ladders, and crawled through tunnels. They were completely gassed. On top of that, the monkey pieces were facing away from the contestants when they picked them up. So you are flipping pieces around, trying to figure out which end is up. While a clock is ticking, producers are screaming directions from the ground, Kirk Fogg is yelling into a microphone, and at any moment, a man in a Mayan mask could burst out of the wall behind you. Easier said than done, does not even begin to cover it. Legends of the Hidden Temple ran for 3 seasons and 120 episodes. It was built out of foam, lumber, and discount electronics. It was hosted by a bartender turned Broadway actor turned game show host who was found in a catalog. Its most iconic character was powered by a RadioShack disco ball. It made kids cry, made kids puke, made kids fight back, and gave an entire generation a lifelong fear of things jumping out of closets. And somehow, despite all of that, or maybe because of all of it, Legends of the Hidden Temple became one of the most beloved television shows of the 1990s. It won awards, it launched a movie, it got rebooted twice. Brie Larson has called it her favorite childhood show. The blue barracudas and silver snakes became Halloween costumes for an entire generation. 30 years later, fans still argue about team rankings, still analyze temple run strategies on dedicated wikis, and still cannot believe that nobody could put 3 pieces of a monkey together. And somewhere out there, in a warehouse, or a collector's attic, or possibly a landfill, there sits a foam rubber head with RadioShack parts in its eye sockets that was once the most powerful being in a child's universe. Olmec lives. Now, Legends of the Hidden Temple was wild. But there is another Nickelodeon show from the exact same era that has a story behind it that is so much darker, so much stranger, and involves things that Nickelodeon desperately does not want you to know. That video is right here on screen. Click it. The choice is yours and yours alone.